Guess who found an opportunity we absolutely can't skip? Wynn's grip on the steering wheel tightened as Cassidy's lilted voice floated up from the back seat of the sedan. That day was supposed to be routine. Just a standard media day. As part of her new role as Cain International's corporate ambassador, her mother had lined up Cassidy's first press appearance at the family's football club. So, naturally, Cassidy dressed with the confidence of someone who knew every camera would turn her way. Her black suit jacket looked sharp enough to cut glass. Her white blouse crisp to perfection, and her red tie sat neatly knotted like it had never once dared misbehave. The skirt and stockings kept the ensemble sleek, while the heels added just enough lift to give her a touch more presence than her 5'3" frame offered on its own. She'd been quietly tapping away on her laptop, and Wynn, her driver, bodyguard, and right-hand man, assumed she was prepping for the media day. If she'd said nothing, he could have lived in bliss a little longer. But she talked. And when Cassidy talked like that, no good ever followed. With his voice already wary, Wynn asked, "Mind telling me what you mean by opportunity before I start bracing for impact?"
Relax, it's nothing complicated. We're just going treasure hunting.
What's the actual problem, and what priceless artifact is about to make my life harder?
Does the name Timm Eisner mean anything to you?
Never met him, never heard of him, and already dreading him.
Public perception paints Timm Eisner as one of the Reconstruction era's finest. A disciplined former officer who recovered countless artifacts in the aftermath of the Great Upheaval. To most, he embodies the ideal gentleman explorer. Naturally, he had a hand in shaping this reputation. He crafted his legend one best-selling travel diary at a time.
Okay, Wynn said. He's famous. Great. Why does that mean we're suddenly chasing treasure?
He's not long for this world. They diagnosed him with cancer last year.
A faint clutch tugged at the base of Wynn's throat, interrupting the smoothness of his breath.
His answer to his diagnosis was to stage one last adventure, she continued. Allegedly, he hid a cache he claims is valued at 1 million crowns for any who can solve his puzzle.
Allegedly? Why the qualifier?
We can't confirm he hid anything, and in light of recent developments, some are understandably starting to doubt him.
Wynn met her gaze in the rearview mirror with a pointed, cutting glance. Cass, riddles later. Truth now. What happened?
Pull the car over,
she said, her voice smoothing into something firm, her green eyes fixed and unblinking. Wynn pulled into the nearest lot. Nugget Nook, the only building in downtown Himmedas brazen enough to look like a giant yellow toy in the city of glass skyscrapers. Nookster, the giant and googly-eyed Nugget mascot, waved cheerfully from above the entrance, utterly oblivious to the mood inside the car. Cassidy stayed composed, serious as stone. She angled her laptop so Wynn could see the open news article glowing across the screen. The image at the top of the screen featured two fair-skinned men, one a few inches taller than the other. The photo looked like something scraped off a social feed. Two guys outdoors, smiling for the camera. They had the same eyes, the same jaw. One radiated excitement, the other radiated tired patience.
Meet Rowan and Evan Carter, Cassidy said. Brothers, 29 and 24. Evan was an Eisner devotee, convinced this treasure hunt was fate handing him his moment. A chance to solve the puzzle, maybe even meet his idol before the end. Rowan didn't share the enthusiasm. You can see it in his face. That expression isn't excitement, that's a man babysitting.
Something in Wynn's stomach sank a notch.
They were acting on an offhand comment, something Eisner offered in a radio interview, where the old path meets the new. It brought them to a dangerously unstable shelled gorge. Evan slipped and Rowan lunged after him. Unfortunately, the ledge beneath them crumbled. Rescuers found Rowan's arms scraped to bone from refusing to release his grip.
Wynn's jaw clenched hard enough to pulse, and For a heartbeat, a raw flicker crossed his face before he forced himself to steady again. Then he tapped the screen and scrolled down to the image of the man responsible. The man in the photo had the polished look of a public figure. Clean white hair, tidy beard, a museum-ready leather jacket that had definitely been chosen for branding rather than warmth. Deep creases weathered his face and pooled under his sunken eyes. His body was hollowed slightly by illness, the edges of his frame worn down like old paper, but he clung to a posture meant to sell the legend one more time. Wynn's eyes narrowed. And the police can't actually do anything about this, can they?
From a legal standpoint, Eisner is spotless. Cassidy held up a finger. First, the treasure is his personal property. He is free to place it where he wishes, so long as the land isn't protected. That's eccentric, not criminal.
Cassidy lifted a second finger.
Second, everyone who searches does so entirely by choice. There's no fee, no contract, no obligation. Legally, it's a voluntary activity, no different from someone posing a challenge online.
She lifted a third finger.
Third, he never gave actual directions. Just poetic riddles and vague metaphors. Nothing that points to specific danger. If someone decides those words lead to a crumbling gorge, the law calls that a hiking accident, not engineered harm.
He could have predicted this, Wynn said, a hard edge creeping into his tone. That alone makes it irresponsible.
Obviously, but irresponsibility isn't a crime. If it were, half the population would be behind bars.
A short, strained breath escaped Wynn, loosening the pressure in his chest a fraction. Cass's reasoning checked out, but still. Is there seriously no legal pushback? She offered a quiet shake of her head, her long red hair trailing the motion with a soft, natural sway.
To be fair to the authorities,
Cassidy said,
they've made what efforts they can. They urged him to end the hunt. When he refused, they issued public advisories, without proof of an actual violation. Trespassing, environmental damage, fraud, their reach stops there.
When they talked to him about it, what did Eisner say?
People collapse running marathons every year, she quoted. Should we cancel all races, or accept that some challenges aren't meant for everyone?
A faint crease carved itself between his brows as he stared ahead. Cassidy's words from a year prior came to him again.
Justice and law often walk side by side, she had said. But they are not one and the same. Institutions have limits which justice cannot abide. Thus, it looks for people who aren't afraid to stride further. I am not afraid.
Back then, Wynn had thought Cassidy was a little unhinged, and undeniably arrogant. He still did, honestly. But she was right more often than she was wrong, and she delivered results. That's why he backed her extra-legal interventions, so long as the job meant certain rules. The case had to require their expertise, the victims had to be innocent, the plan had to be feasible, and if the world wasn't burning yet, they didn't rush. Sadly, if anything screamed Grandmaster job, it was this. The law had stalled out, and if they walked away, more bodies would hit the ground. He wasn't living with that. Hit me with the plan, Wynn said. Cassidy's mouth tilted into that practiced smirk she saved for moments when she thought she was being clever.
You've likely noticed I haven't brought up the riddle, she said. With the circumstances as they are, it's irrelevant. Instead, we'll address this at its origin.
He blinked slowly. The kind of blink a man wakes up when the picture isn't adding up. If the plan was to get answers from the man himself... We're not shaking down an old guy with cancer, right?
What? No! Stop jumping to extremes! I'm simply going to march into his home and discuss the matter with him in private. If the treasure is real, he'll give me the location. If it isn't, he'll confess and we'll resolve this whole fiasco.
For a beat, Wynn's brain refused to process anything at all, and he caught himself staring. Cass. Seriously? You walk in, ask, and he just tells you?
Nicely, Wynne. I'll ask nicely. I'm not a brute.
He scrubbed a hand over his face, as if that might clear the madness out of his ears. Please tell me I don't actually have to explain why that's a bad idea.
You needn't worry. I've prepared a contingency. If things go sideways, which they won't, you step in after he calls the cops claiming he's caught the Grandmaster of Theft, and you pretend to arrest me.
Why would he think he caught the Grandmaster? Why would that ever cross his mind?
Because I'm going to tell him. Not that I'm Cassidy the Grandmaster, just the Grandmaster of Theft the Grandmaster.
Why? Why would you tell him that? Why would that ever be part of the plan?
Because that's how the plan works. There's no version where I don't say it.
Wynne frowned and studied her closely. Cassidy smirked and reveled in being studied. You're not telling me the real plan, are you?
You've got the essentials. Let me handle the spectacle.
With that line, the scheme Cassidy would later title the Eisner Affair was set in motion. They kept quiet about it for the rest of the day, as Cassidy pivoted back to her familial obligations. When the following morning came, she invited Wynne into her bedroom and presented a detailed roadmap for the operation. The objective lay in Janvik, in Eisner's renovated heritage home overlooking the old mine works. Sharp security, the high-end outfit protecting him since before the hunt, was the single moving part.
They're not an issue,
she reassured him with a yawn. First, she planned to enter Eisner's home by invitation. The persona was simple, a journalist chasing a puff piece about his past adventures. To make it believable, she turned to her underworld broker, Lila, who built a supporting infrastructure. A registered domain, a website, a few published articles, an email server, social accounts, a shell LLC, a fake staff roster, and a rented mailbox. Together, they formed the Convincer, the tiny but essential proofs that make fiction behave like fact. Second, she built an exit plan for the scenario where her cover slipped. The guards would do what guards always did: restrain her, call the police, and stand back. That was the scene they'd exploit. Cassidy could reroute the call through Cain-owned telecom infrastructure with almost no effort. Wynne would arrive, posing as an officer, something made easier by Janvik's rural isolation, using a cleaned-up decommissioned cruiser and a badge Lila acquired. Finally, he'd take custody of the suspect and deliver her safely out of Janvik.
Just to be clear,
Cassidy said after explaining her contingency,
the backup plan is just that. Backup. We won't reach a point where it's needed.
Cassidy never explained her certainty. She treated it like oxygen. Assumed, not discussed. Instead, she focused on movement. The next 4 days were split cleanly. Lila built the journalist cover and secured the exfiltration tools, while Cassidy pitched her mother on a market scouting trip to the mainland's smaller towns. Her mother gave a delighted yes, and day 5 marked their departure. The rest unfolded smoothly. The overlap between elite security and stealth operations meant most of the work was done before they even tried. One identity carried them onto the flight. Another checked them into a hotel a town over, and a third drove them out under cover of night. By dawn of the 6th day, with supplies gathered and roles locked in, they separated to begin the job.